Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life. Not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud at VMSPod, like Virtual Memory Show Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/Virtual Memories Show, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. You can also go to YouTube and look for Virtual Memories Show, and you'll find about 50 or 60 episodes there. It's just a still image and the audio, but some people like it that way. Now, you can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/VMSPod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my monthly bonus podcast. Actually, it's now quarterly, but whatever. It's called Fear of a Square Planet, and it features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/VMSPod or paypal.me/VMSPod and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. I'm back from Toronto, and I am off to Philadelphia. I'm actually posting this episode a few hours later than usual because I'm so goddamn harried. We spent this past weekend, my wife and I, at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, or TCAF as it's known, an annual event we go to every year so I can get out of the country for Mother's Day. Also so I can see cartoonists, get in podcasts, buy some neat books, etc. But, also the Mother's Day thing. Anyway, this time around, I got in a couple of great podcasts with the cartoonists Kyler Roberts and Seth. I recorded with Seth a few years ago, and we had a really good conversation this time around, too. That's, you'll get that in a couple of weeks. I also got to talk to a ton of upcoming and, maybe potential guests. And I had a nice shooting of the breeze with Juno Diaz, about a mutual pal of ours, which was kind of neat because I met him previously at a reader con. We never really got to talk before, so it was kind of cool to take us both out of our other contexts. And I got to meet some listeners of the show, which always freaks me out, but was kind of neat. And I was really gratified to hear from people who really dig what I'm doing. That freaking out thing, though, is probably why I ask a lot of my guests what it was like in the moment that they realized they had an audience. Not that I have some giant size audience here, but it is always interesting to meet the people who actually are listening to me now. And I hope you still do for a long time. I also got in some business and a little time with my cousin, who lives up in Toronto. So it was a really good weekend all around. Lots of neat dining. Korean barbecue, Nepalese, the great, now closing down restaurant called Bench. It's going to be closed in a week or so, but it's our favorite restaurant in Toronto. Lai Wah Heen, this amazing, really high-end Chinese restaurant. Basically everything but, North American fare. We had a really good time. And like I said, I'm off to Philadelphia shortly for a trade show, and I'm hoping a podcast session with next week's guest, in fact. Otherwise, you're getting Kyler Roberts or Seth next Tuesday. Now, this time around, you get legendary illustrator, animator, cartoonist, artist, ad man, R.O. Blechman. And this is a really weird episode. I'm going to put that right out there. I pride myself on not getting overwhelmed or freaked out by guests of stature, but something didn't work this time around for me. R.O. Blechman, when I read you his bio, you're going to get some idea of what I mean about the scope of his life and his career. But there was something about it I couldn't grasp. I couldn't get all the way around who he is and all the accomplishments he's had over the decades. And I didn't do a great job. That's what I'm going to say. I should have focused more narrowly on some of some area of what he did. But I almost felt like it's my one shot, and it's somebody whose artistic career and business career spans many, many decades, and I just couldn't do it. I didn't know where to start or stop. So anyway, it's a good conversation, but I really felt like I could have done better. I could have focused in on him. We had a really good time talking afterwards, and I'm hoping very much he gives me the opportunity in future to sit down again and kind of narrow focus. Maybe have Sundays with RO or something. That said, I started off by blowing his mind, which I felt pretty good about. See, I have an issue of a comic book called Humbug that came out in 1958, this humor book by Harvey Kurtzman and a whole lot of cartoonists. I bought it at a festival a few years ago, and Blechman did the cover for this. And like I said, this is 1958, but I was looking at all the issues that the guy had. There were only a dozen or so in the box, and that was the one that jumped out at me. So for I don't know, $50 or $60, I said, I am getting an issue of Humbug, and it's going to be this one. So I showed him that. I brought that up when R.O. and I sat down, and I think that boosted my credibility with him. He looked at it. He saw things in it that he hadn't seen previously in the almost 60 years since it had come out. The image is going to be in the show notes for this episode, so go check that out. At chimeraobscura.com/VM or at vmspod.com. There'll be an issue of Humbug connected to this episode. You'll see what I'm talking about. Here is the bio for R.O. Blechman. There are many bios for him. Ed Sorel does a great one for him. R.O. has a long one on his website. But this one comes from the 2009 collection, Talking Lines, the graphic stories of R.O. Blechman, which is published by Drawn and Quarterly. Born Oscar Robert Blechman in 1930, R.O. Blechman's internationally acclaimed artwork spans decades, mediums, and industries. He is one of the first contemporary cartoonists to pen a full-length graphic novel with The Juggler of Our Lady in 1953, which he published after graduating from Oberlin College. His illustrations and comic strips have graced magazines, anthologies, and newspapers. He has created more than a dozen New Yorker covers. Blechman is also an animated filmmaker and at one time owned his own animation studio, the Ink Tank. He has been awarded the Gold Medal from the Cannes Film Festival, numerous Emmy Awards, and has been nominated for a BAFTA. In 2002, the Museum of Modern Art held a retrospective of his films. He is also in the Art Directors Hall of Fame, has been an Adweek Illustrator of the Year, and is the creator of many notable advertising campaigns. Blechman is married, has 2 sons, and lives in Ancrum, New York. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with R.O. Blechman. Bunch of notes. I was going to start with a Tennyson quote that though much is taken, much abides, from his poem about Ulysses. Mm-hmm. What has time brought you?
Time?
Yeah.
I mean, what have I accomplished, or what has it taught me?
Yeah. What have you, and what abides?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know I start big, but trust me, we'll fine tune.
Yeah. I don't know that it's taught me very much. I mean, I was asked to do something for Tom Younger's 85th birthday. And so I did a little cartoon of myself as an 86-year-old telling the 85-year-old, we're just a bunch of kids. And it's very true. I don't think that you replace yourself, you just add to yourself. So you're a baby, you're an adolescent, you're a teenager, you're a middle-aged guy, you're an old guy, but you're all lumped together. And you never know who is going to make an appearance wearing your clothes. And also, let's face it, if you don't play, you're not an artist, you're not a writer, you're not a creative person. You have to be in a state of play, and that's being a child. So again, I don't know that time may have taught me things, but I don't know that I've learned anything. Because I think, again, you're the same person you were, in addition to being all these other people that have grown up with you, within you. Sorry, Mr. Tennyson, I'm not doing very well by.
Well, that's okay. Again, it's Ulysses off trying to drag his crew out for one more mission as opposed to having an ongoing career. Do you see your career working in phases? In particular, do you see
phases?
Yeah, a sort of a continuum of your work, or do you see distinct periods of this is what my work was then versus the next stage?
Well, not really. I mean, my earliest work, in 1940 something, I was doing graphic stories, which meant that I liked to write and I liked to draw. Now I find myself doing a lot more writing than I had done. And so in that sense, yeah, there's a career shift. I mean, I will be having a book coming out next year, which Fantagraphics is publishing. Actually, it's a very interesting book. It's called 2 by 1. The two being the two aspects of my career, my writing and my drawing. So one book will naturally be 2 books in one. One book will be my artwork, and my other book will be my writing. And it'll be together in one volume. But
sort of a flip, like those science fiction books.
Yeah.
You remember those? The 2-in-1 novels I used to read in my youth. Yeah, how do those two aspects inform each other for you, writing and drawing?
Well, they come from the same person.
Yeah.
So I think all my obsessions will come out in both forms.
Is there the sense, though, of this would work better as a cartoon? This should probably turn into full prose?
No, not really. I find that I do both together. Recently, I suppose in the last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of paintings in which I combine text and a visual, text and image. It's very different from my other stuff in that it's very well designed. I'm very conscious of the overall graphic element in these things. I'm bothered because I have no way of showing these things. I mean, I really ought to find a gallery, but I don't know how the hell to find a gallery. And anyway, I don't want to find a gallery, I suppose, because I don't want to sell the stuff. I like them too much.
Yeah.
They're my children, and I don't want to be living without them.
They could sell them as a posthumous. Then once I'm gone, you can get possession, but,
Yeah.
But do you feel... Does it feel new to you, doing something like that, working in that form?
Yeah.
Because, when I recorded with Pfeiffer, I guess 2 or 3 years ago, it was... Turns out, at 85 years old, I discovered I was supposed to be doing 100-plus page graphic novels. I didn't realize it until now. I was doing all this other work, but this turns out to be the thing I was meant to do all these years.
Oh, sure. Well, the guy is very verbal, very visual, and very bright. So, yeah.
And you have that sense with this work that this is, I want to say meaningful, but something that's, is where your art is.
Yeah, I love doing it because, I was very lucky. This has nothing to do with them. I received a telephone call 20 years ago from a guy in Ohio who had resurrected a magazine of the 30s called Story Magazine. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to take one of my visuals, drawings, paintings, illustrations, whatever, and use it as a cover. And he would pay me $100 for it. And I thought Ed Koren had done the first issue, and so I would be doing the second issue. And I thought to myself, God, I just love doing design work, covers, that sort of thing. And so I told him, yeah, forget the $100. I mean, that's not important to me, but I'd love the idea of doing something original. So I accept the commission. And then I went on to do every single issue. Well, they're all here.
Yeah, I see behind us.
And I love doing that stuff. Now, if I was practical, I would have said, hey, come on now. I don't lift my pencil and a pen and do anything for $100. I'm sorry if you can't give me more than that. Thanks very much for calling me, but it's I'm too busy to take this on. But it was one of the best decisions they ever made. And I suppose from a business point of view, it was sheer folly, but from a career point of view, it was a wonderful breakthrough. If you look around the studio, you'll see a poster that was made from one of my story covers. You'll see another story cover there, and there I turned them into serigraphs. Sometimes you have to be impractical, which is being the most practical. You can't always look at things monetarily.
Yeah, where did the design thing start for you? I know that some of that has to be intuitive, but how does that differ from you were doing editorial cartooning initially in college. Where did design come from for you?
Well, if you're visual, you're visual. If you're verbal, you're verbal. If you're musical, you're musical. You can turn your talent into any aspect of.
I have known some illustrators who are very poor designers, but
it's hard that they can't be good illustrators.
Yeah,
yeah, I'm sure of that. Huh. It's very interesting. I'll show you a book I did in 1953. I was just out of college. I was out of college in 1952. And I don't know how I got to show my work to the Oxford University Press. I have no idea how I got there. I don't think they saw my work. I must have somehow introduced myself to them. But they were coming out with an edition of the Broadway play Harvey. And they gave me my very first big commission. And that was to illustrate the place. And I'll show you the cover. Mm-hmm. The cover has nothing to do with the illustrations that I did. And that's very graphic stuff.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the illustrations. But what interests me is that it's almost filmic.
Yeah, I see.
In fact, it was like now I know. Oh, it starts here with footsteps. That's like a pan. And now I realize what it was that got me to Oxford University Press. I think they may have seen this book, which I did, although I didn't do the book jacket.
The Juggler of Our Lady?
Yeah. Because I was taken into the army. But look also how filmic the damn thing is. The thing moves like a film. So now I know what happened. I did this in 1952. Then was drafted into the army. Then it was after the army, I guess, that Oxford University Press may have seen this or heard about this and gave me the commission to do Harvey. What I remember was that I was interviewed by the publicity director of the Oxford University Press, John Ashbery. I don't know who the hell John Ashbery was. But I remember the face. It was just a great face. Fast forward 40, 50 years later, really. I'm in a local store here in the country, and I see that face. It turns out to be John Ashbery, who happened to be living not that far from here.
Yeah, it's now renowned poet, but yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm curious, when, God, I don't know.
When Harvey came out?
Yeah, 53.
Yeah. So we've been right on the heels of
Well, yeah. It must have been before I was drafted.
Can you talk a little about your line?
My line?
Yeah, and the sense of the line as signature.
Well, it's natural and contrived, both. When I started doing drawings professionally, or when I started doing drawings, period, the line was very stiff. It had no character at all. I remember a calligraphy teacher of mine in 1948, something like 47, 48, when I went to Columbia for a year, I had gone to Oberlin. Then I took my junior year in Columbia. Then I went back to Oberlin. My teacher said, Mr. Blechman, your line has absolutely no character, which is a terrible thing to say, but it was absolutely true. Although that didn't do me any good because, okay, so my line doesn't have any character, but it's my line. It comes from my character. Mm-hmm. I can't change it. But then, bit by bit, I gave it more of a lively quality, a living quality, and so it was something of an artificial thing, because I certainly didn't start out with this, what's called a nervous line, a squiggly line, whatever. It's something that I developed. I guess it's like a style of writing. You're not born with a certain way of writing or speaking or thinking. You develop it. So it was natural and it was artificial, both. I don't know that answers the question, but it's the best I can do.
Well, I guess it's a question of when did you hit on it? Like, when did you realize this is how I draw? This is, what my line is. When did you become comfortable with it, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, let me not answer the question, but instead say that I work very hard on my line. As I work very hard on my drawings. Sometimes they come out very quickly, but for the most part, I do a lot of paste-ups, and because I don't like the quality of the line, I don't like where it's going, so I make amendments, if that's the word. It's probably not the word, but so be it. So I struggle with my art. I was very surprised when I came across a book by Milton Glaser, who said as a subtitle for one of the books he came out with, art is work. And I was very surprised to hear that by him, because I remember I once visited him, and he had to interrupt our conversation by taking a telephone call. But he was still doing his artwork while he was taking the telephone call, and I believe the radio was still on, which I'm sure he was listening to. And he was still paying some attention to me. I mean, here's the guy who could have and should have been torn into 4 different directions, but no, there he was. Didn't look to me as if work was very hard when he could multitask that way.
Do you have a set of? Do you have an environment you need to be under your control when you're creating? Do you need things to be quiet, or can you have music going? Do you have a work routine? I guess that's the question. Do you have?
No, it's a good question. Yeah. No, I don't have a work routine.
But you do have this gorgeous studio, so that probably helps with the environment.
Well, it does, yeah. I mean, I find that I get a lot of my ideas at night at off moments, so I always have a pencil and pad and write things down, ideas for work, be that for something verbal or visual. Mm-hmm. Since, again, I enjoy writing and I enjoy drawing. Yes. Don't always enjoy it. Sometimes I hate both when they don't turn out right.
Is the hate generally for the commission work, or is it or do you find yourself hating your personal work?
Well, I find that I'm in a situation now where I do, as you may have seen, visuals for poems in the Sunday New York Times Magazine. And very often, I don't know what the hell the poems are all about. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I managed to visualize them. Sometimes I call the art director or the editor and I ask them what the poem is about, and they don't know. But then John Ashbery was once asked, what is his poems like? And he says, I don't know. What do you think they're like? I mean, what bothers me about so many of the poems I'm asked to illustrate is that they're too damn personal to the creator. There's no attempt to communicate. It really bothers me. It seems to me that if art doesn't communicate, then what's the value of the art? What's the meaning of it? Why do it? You're not doing it to amuse yourself. You're doing it to reach people. And if you don't want to reach people, why bother with the work? I mean, it seems to me you have thoughts which you ought to be able to communicate, which you should communicate. I don't like the way I phrase that, but so be it. No, I'm like Steinberg, who believed that it's essential to reach people, to talk to them with your pen or brush or both. So, all right.
I echo that when it comes to modern poetry and contemporary art. I can also find vacuous and self-absorbed.
Absolutely.
There's nothing to.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's really bothersome. I mean, it's the whole thing about the new being more worthwhile than the good. Somehow, something new has a value
intrinsic to being.
And thank you so much. Yeah, which is nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me ask, because one of the things I find most fascinating about your writing and your art is the literary background of it. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of artists I know don't have time to read so much. What is your literary background, and how do you who do you read, I suppose? Because in the Dear James book, you bring up a whole lot of my favorite writers. So,
I love Thomas Mann. I adore Virginia Woolf at her best. Fascinated by the Bloomsbury Crowd. Who else do I like? I don't read all that much. I read a lot more essays than I do fiction.
But I see you've got a very slim Montaigne book on the shelf over there. So
yeah.
I know he comes up briefly in Dear James also. I spent a few years blogging my way through the entirety of the essays. So yeah.
He's an extraordinary guy.
Yeah. But where did literature start out for you? How did you find yourself
probably had a hell of a lot to do with the fact that I had a really, really good English teacher when I went to Oberlin College. Mm-hmm. The English department was very, very strong. And I didn't appreciate the teacher at the time, but I sure as hell do now. One of the things he did, I'm going to skip that. I'll start over again. He had us read Ulysses, no fun. The Age of Innocence, probably the best of
Wharton.
Edith Wharton's stuff, yeah, which I have to reread. I ought to. I was just reading about the Age of Innocence, in which a critic called it the best of her books.
It was also, I'd only read it a few years ago for the first time because New York Magazine was doing a best this and best that of New York. And they considered it, their writer considered it the best New York novel. And I thought, I should give that a read and figure out. And lo and behold, it is a very good.
Oh yeah, and her short stories are amazing.
Yeah.
Who else did I read? Henry James, The Beast in the Jungle. Do you know The Beast in the Jungle? Oh God, is that amazing?
I've talked about that with another guest. That is the wrongest thing to give high school students.
Why?
Because they don't understand what it means to be at the end of your life, not having made a wrong decision that kind of sends when you're 17, that just can't
Yeah, and I can understand that. Yeah. Isn't it interesting that as high school students we were given an Edith Wharton book, Ethan Frome?
Yeah.
What the hell could that mean to a kid?
Right.
Go kill yourself.
It's all desperation from here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what else did this teacher give me? Can't remember, but he set the course. We were talking about the Washington Post.
Michael Durda. Yeah.
The English department meant a hell of a lot to him also. Mm-hmm. No, it was a very good department. Art department, not so good. I didn't take any art courses, thank God. My son went to Oberlin, and he took a few applied art courses. And during the spring break, he showed me some of the things he had done, or I asked him what he had been doing, and then he showed the stuff to me. And I said, "Oh God, that stuff is great. Hey, Nicholas, you're really good." And he said, "Dad, are you serious?" I said, "Of course I'm serious. You think I'm joking?" "Well, my teacher didn't like it. Dropped the course, for God's sakes." The great problem was that you had to have a master's if you went into teaching in college. Mm-hmm. And if you're an artist, why the hell would you want to get a master's? You want to go right into the field itself.
Yeah, and that comes up in your letters to a young illustrator. There's the the question is set up: should the correspondent's brother go to liberal arts school or to an arts program? And you come down firmly on the side of a liberal arts education. I mean, do you really feel that art itself is in a sense something you have to practice? You're going to pick up on. You can find the solutions.
I'm not sure of the question.
Let's see. Well, like you were saying, do you think art school itself is worthless?
No, but I believe that you can discover your own path by yourself, and it will be your path. Look, Maurice Sendak was a polymath. He never went to art school. He never went to college. But he was such an artist that he couldn't stop doing art. And such a writer, he couldn't stop writing books. And so I don't know that school would have had any meaning for him. But I mentioned that in Dear James, that Joseph Conrad could hardly speak any English. He was a Pole. Found that he had to write. And so he found his own vocabulary and et cetera, et cetera.
Did you have any trepidation about your son going into the family business?
No, because he loved to draw. Okay. Unlike me, I never liked to draw. I never drew as a kid.
What started drawing for you? To phrase that in better English, why did you start drawing?
Well, I wanted to show off. I was not verbal. I was very shy. And the only way I could reach people was to make them laugh. And it was about the only thing I could do somewhat well. It was showing off. That's what it was all about. And then I found, hey, I like doing this stuff. Oh my God, I'm pretty good at it. Maybe it was also something I inherited because my uncle was a very good cartoonist, but he went into the family business. But he was very visual. And so maybe, and that's very interesting because on my other side of the family, I have a cousin who is a sculptor and is a very good artist. So probably I inherited artistic genes, if I can explain it that way. But obviously I love doing this stuff, but I think that an aspect of it was that I was showing off.
That there was a reward
yeah.
of some kind to doing it. And your son actually developed, showed an affinity and an actual enjoyment of it?
Yeah, he's very good. Yeah, he always drew. And it had nothing to do with me. He probably didn't even know that I was an artist. But he just enjoyed doing it. But of course, my wife is extremely visual, and her family has been visual for generations. So my son inherited both. He's now creative director of The New Yorker, by the way. He was appointed a few months ago.
Can you talk a little about you've had a number of careers, I guess, within, or at least a number of jobs, I guess, within your life. One of which was essentially creative director role in an advertising, in an advertising world, essentially a Mad Men era role. Mm-hmm. Did you watch Mad Men and cringe? Did you have any sense?
No, not
that this
really.
was
I don't have a television.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I cringe because I don't have a television. I really ought to. Yeah. But no, I'm sure it was make believe. I'm sure it was fiction.
Are there aspects of that world that you kind of look back on, either fondly or I can't believe we used to work like this?
I loved it. First of all, the stuff was so simple, for me to come up with those silly ideas. There was nothing at all. I liked design a lot. And so it was great for me to do design work. What I didn't like was the fact that I never paid much attention to the products I was asked to advertise. But, I had to cut that aspect of myself out of the picture. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I couldn't have lasted. I didn't do cigarettes. I would have turned that stuff down. But again, I liked it because it was so simple-minded. It was a vacation from my serious work.
Yeah, tough was it for you to balance those things? Or was it essentially that the design, that the money had to come first and then the play came second? Or were you more in tension, I guess, as you were working on those things, trying to balance that?
No, I had no conflict at all. I enjoyed doing graphic work. I enjoyed doing solving problems. I mean, again, if you're a creative person, you're in a state of play. And so advertising to me was a game, and a very easy one, and a very lucrative one. So I enjoyed it. I mean, the only thing I didn't enjoy was that I had to work with a copywriter, and I thought verbally as well as visually, and yet I had to work with somebody else, and your ideas come as verbal and visual together.
Yeah. But they're in charge of the verbal, and therefore
your
stuff is moderated.
Yeah. I'm sure it's very difficult for any creative person in advertising, because I think that a lot of verbal people are visual, a lot of visual people are verbal. You're just creative, and you just move from one area to another pretty effortlessly.
Even in my trade magazine days, there was the you stay out of this. This is the art department, Gil. You don't have to.
Oh, yeah, it's awful.
like, yeah, I know, but I know how this should look, and you know how to actually make it look like that. So but yeah, I can imagine it's more frustrating the higher the stakes are. So, between the advertising and also running an animation studio for years, what was collaboration like for you? Given that we tend to think of cartooning or illustrating as a solitary project, whereas animation and filmmaking and advertising are ones where you're reliant on so many people. Was that a learning curve for you, or did you again have to balance those?
Well, I was lucky enough to work with a lot of very good animators, and I worked with a lot of good artists. So it was a great pleasure for me to have my work, with quotation marks around the "my," supplemented by the extraordinary input that my staff provided. And what my staff didn't provide, I hired people who were absolutely fantastic.
Were you good at managing? Managing, staff? Was that a?
Well, yes and no. I was much of a businessman. I don't think I'm much of a businessman now. But no, what I would do is I would map things out in a very broad way, and then I would make sure that whoever I was working with was encouraged to elaborate on what I provided. Because I know that when I'm given something, I hate it when I'm told what it is I should draw or what it is I should do. And so the amount of respect that I needed, I gave to others. I was very fortunate in that my colleagues were quite extraordinary.
It sounds like it's not just good fortune, that it is actually good management skills to pick good people and also to communicate the way you were talking about. This isn't to flatter you immensely,
No.
But that is actually something that most people don't think of when they have people working for them. So.
Yeah.
Myself, for example, I'm a micromanaging control freak, and it's very difficult for me to work with anybody else because they're not telepathic and can't figure out exactly what I need done. So, so I should take a lesson from that. But you enjoyed the experience beyond the financial and business aspects of it. You enjoyed the whole studio?
Yeah. I mean, I really think in a way I went into the wrong career.
Yeah.
Both as an artist and as a writer for the little amount of writing that I do. I really should have been a filmmaker. I really screwed up my life in a terrible way because I had the chance to become a full-time filmmaker and I threw it away and it kills me.
Just animation or
no,
just
film.
In general? Okay.
Film.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a hell of a confession to make, but when I was in the Army, after basic training, I was given an MOS, military occupational specialty. It's a hell of a thing to confess. The Korean War was on, and it was a bloody, awful war. And I was given the chance, I was told, Private Blechman, you're to go to Astoria, Long Island to film school. And I turned the goddamn thing down. Ostensibly because the Korean War was on, I was told I would be carrying a camera instead of a rifle. Bullshit. I don't know why I did that. It's the worst, most fateful decision I ever made in my life. And I've made others similarly. What a hell of a thing to have to confess.
60 years after the fact.
It kills me because I'm a filmmaker. Look, if you do a graphic novel, what the hell is it? But it's a film in still form, it's a storyboard.
Do you feel comics, I've read you saying that in the past, do you feel there's anything intrinsic to comics that breaks away from that film, that still storyboard aspect?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I see you have like Chris Ware on the shelf over here, the Jimmy Corrigan book. There are aspects of that aren't, they're using comics in a way that isn't simply sequential.
I have a little problem with Chris Ware, but I don't have a problem with Seth. He did one book that just knocks me out. It's a good life if you don't waver or something like that.
If you don't weaken,
If you don't weaken, amazing book. Well, another terrible decision I made in my life is that after I did The Soldier's Tale, I got a telephone call from a lady with a strong German accent saying that she had seen The Soldier's Tale and that her husband had done a series of books called Curious George. Perhaps you heard of them. And I say, yeah, sure. I read them to my kids. Yeah, I love them. Well, I was asked by a film company to make a feature out of Curious George, and I would love it if you would be the director. And I said, no, I'm not interested, but thank you very much. I'm flattered by your request. What a dumb thing to do. I think after working on an Igor Stravinsky opera, was I going to do something about a monkey? And the answer was, yeah, you should have done something with that monkey. Yeah. I made a monkey out of myself by turning it down. It was a terrible decision. And then I went on to...
But that decision was driven by the monkey is beneath you? In that respect? Like you felt that you...
I think I wanted to do a film on the golden ass of Apuleius. I loved it. Mm-hmm. And I started it and never went anywhere. And then I did one on Candide, which I dropped and I shouldn't have. my Candide unfortunately followed too closely to Voltaire's. But when one evening I recut the whole damn thing and I made it mine, wow, it started to sing. But by then I had lost my animation studio, which I won't go into detail about. But I still should have pursued my Candide. It was really good. It was my Candide, which is why it worked. It had been Voltaire's Candide, which was a fine book, but wasn't necessarily a fine film. But I somehow was enslaved by the book, and I didn't realize, hey, when you adapt. Exactly. Yeah. You're making a film. You're not making a book, and you're making your film. So in any event, I've learned since.
Is it the sort of thing that would adapt into a comic also, or were there really filmic aspects?
Well, actually,
not that I'm giving you ideas at this point.
No. I still want to do a film. I think I may be in a position to do a film as it happens. I don't know whether it'll ever come to life or not, but I have a feeling that I'm on to a nice idea for a film. And it may or may not happen, and it damn well better happen this year. It'll never happen because I'm 86 years old and I've still got my health and energy, but those things dissipate fast and unexpectedly. But now I'm on to something that I had called My Animated Life, except that the title had already been taken by an Australian company, so it's An Animated Life. Mm-hmm. And it's turning out well. I like it. It's autobiographical. And I see myself as a 2D character in a 3D world. And it's as much about my life, the 40s and 50s and the 60s up to the present, as about me as an illustrator and animated filmmaker. But it's an interesting little thing because I'm talked into it by my Alka-Seltzer stomach.
Which is one of your great ad campaigns.
Because I can't stand the fact that he had this short-lived, brilliant burst of fame with these 60-second spots, and now who the hell sees him? And so he talks me into doing a film about myself, but he really wants to star in it. And so he hogs the whole goddamn thing. So in a way, it's his film and I'm some sidekick. But I worked it out, and it might happen and it might not happen. We'll see. We'll see.
Learning anything about yourself in the process of trying to write that? In that retrospective?
No, it just comes right out.
Yeah.
It comes right out. And it could be quite commercial. We'll see. I have interest in it.
I'll be in LA in early June. I can go around and do pitches for you. We'll see.
No, I'll be right.
When it comes to animation, obviously the entire field has changed. Technology's really, like you said, you're a 2D man in a 3D world. Do you keep up at all with
what's happening in the animation field?
With what's happening and how to do that, or is it,
Well, even when I did My Soldier's Tale, there were a lot of digital effects, there were a lot of computer animation, not a lot, but this was when early 80s. But I happen not to like 3D animation. To me, it's an uncomfortable blend of live action and 2D animation. It's just, and it's cold. There aren't that mistakes, the mistakes in quotes, that reveal the human behind the artwork. It's a little too cold and impersonal. And every now and then I see Japanese manga and I say, it's an uncomfortable cross between animation and live action. I don't like this stuff.
I had that when the trailer for the Peanuts movie came out, and the idea that you're seeing Charles Schultz characters turned into like 3D shaded, lighting and all that. I couldn't watch the movie. I just saw the trailer. That's just the wrongest way to take it.
Yeah, bad news. Yeah.
Did you do any digital work, or is everything?
No, as a matter of fact, I'm coming out with a book called Of All Things God, 48 Famous and Creative People. This is the subtitle, Talk About God. And I found that I had to do 48 full-page color visuals, and I did the whole damn thing in Photoshop. I can't believe it.
Were you able to draw?
Well, no,
through a tablet, or were you scanning a picture?
What I did is I scanned black and white drawing, but then all the coloring was done with Photoshop, and I use a lot of design motifs, which is a bad way of expressing it, but I don't know how the hell I did it, because I'm very untechnical.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you get any better over the course of 48 of them?
Yeah, I had to do the stuff.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that I really did 48 of them by myself.
Yeah, some cartoonists, Ben Catcher, and I've told this story on the show a few times, Ben mentioned during our interview that he only works digitally. He draws on a tablet, doesn't draw on paper.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Either people have that reaction, or they say, oh yeah, you can tell because his line changed after, this thing a few years ago, and that's how they knew it was digital and not on paper.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's weird to me that
well, has Ben Catcher's work changed since he did them digitally?
Again, he thinks it's easier. He also thinks no one is interested in seeing the originals of his work, which I was a little perplexed by. But I'm not a cartoonist, so I'm interested in seeing things in process, I suppose. But yeah, it was a big live event we were doing this at, and half the room was surprised, and the other half's like, no, you can tell because his line just gets different.
Yeah.
The content isn't any different, but his it makes it easier for him apparently. So, I had wondered if you'd ever tried the tablet drawing.
No, I'm not interested in it. Why do it?
Yeah, I think it's an ease.
This old dog can't be taught new tricks.
What kind of pen do you use?
Unfortunately, it's not a flexible pen. I wish to God it were. Steinberg used a flexible pen, and boy, the occasional swelling of that line is beautiful. No, it's just a mechanical pen.
Only because a lot of cartoonists listen to the show, and I'm sure they're going to ask me, why didn't you ask him what pen he uses?
Yeah. Well, I think it's called, I don't know what it's called, but it can only give one thickness line.
Mm-hmm. Did you have, I would say living artistic idols when you were coming up, and people who you got to meet subsequently that, did you have a moment of being treated like a peer by someone you used to look up to?
No.
Like a Steinberg or anyone like that? Was there a moment of, oh my God, they're treating me like I'm one of them?
Well, very interesting. If you go to my house, you'll see a drawing that Steinberg gave me when I was 17 or 18 years old. What happened is that I was in Ohio, Oberlin, and I had seen his work in PM magazine, a PM newspaper, short-lived liberal daily. And I wrote the guy, but it was in the form of a 24-page booklet about why I, in Ohio, needed to have one of his things in New York, from New York. I couldn't believe that he actually sent me a wonderful drawing and inscribed it to R.O. Blechman, Steinberg, 1940...
48, 49.
48, 49 maybe. And I couldn't, and what happened is, I got to know an artist who was his assistant for many years. And he mentioned that, I don't know how I got to meet him, Anton von Dahlen. And he mentioned that Steinberg was having an opening and he was going. Would I like to go? So I said, sure. I'd have met Steinberg. This was in 55, 6, something like that. And I saw Steinberg. I was introduced to him by Anton. And he said, oh, it's so nice to meet you. There are very few people who ask me for my work and then turn out to be artists themselves. He was very, very gracious. Mm-hmm. It's the only time I ever met the guy. But I was thrilled.
Yeah, I was going to say, were you pretty speechless, though? That's.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I was doing crappy stuff then. I mean, my early stuff was awful. It was bright because it was so awful looking. I had to compensate for the look of it by the
but do you think you saw something?
And humor and intelligence of it, you know. But bit by bit, I started to improve my drawing. I was very aware of the fact that the stuff looks awful. And so I paid more attention to the aesthetics of it, which I had never paid much attention to. But I mean, I'm a very visual guy.
Yeah, how much of that development was intuitive, I guess, and how much required like a sense of study, like you looking to see why doesn't this work? How do I make this better?
It was intuitive.
Yeah.
No, and it just gradually got better and better and better. I didn't like what I was doing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm looking at my humbug cover there, and it's probably true that like a nut, I move those hats around. God knows why. I mean, I can't imagine that it makes any difference if one is an eighth or a 16th of an inch off, but it made a big difference to me then when I was doing the cover. But I still obsess about my drawing. I do a lot of versions.
Yeah, what frustrates you?
I'm too quick. I do something. Sometimes I send it in, and then I think of some better way of doing it, and I send that in. And I probably drive the art directors crazy, because in the New York Times they know, okay, they give me an assignment on Monday, I'll give them something later that day, but then I'll do something on Tuesday.
They know to wait.
Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
But Tuesday afternoon, no, I haven't. And sometimes I'll give them something on Thursday, and they say, but the thing already went to press. But now they know that they don't accept the first thing, and then I don't put it into a layout because they know I'll change it, you know.
That's funny. It's funny because I don't have to do that job.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is the, I know the market has obviously changed, but how has the whole process of that changed for you, working with working with the Times, for example, or other venues?
No, it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
No.
They still ask for something with 1 day's notice, and
yeah, but I do it. I'm very quick. You have to remember that I did a lot of work for the New York Times, and it was always quick turnarounds, and it was some of my best work, and it was done very quickly. Fortunately, the drawings and the ideas were good. Now I find, sure, the ideas and the drawings are good, but then I continually perfect them. But my art directors know that they don't.
Don't commit.
Yeah, they don't lay the stuff out until the very last moment.
Now, the last few years you've been at the Mocha Festival. You've come in.
No,
I thought you came in last year.
Well, because I was asked.
Okay.
I don't go to the Mocha festivals. I like them, but I don't.
Do you get to see what's happening? I suppose within
Not this year, but last year I enjoyed very much seeing what's around. But I'm not that familiar with what's happening in the graphic novel field.
Yeah. Do you keep up at all with with any either fellow artists or younger cohort? You mentioned Seth previously, but
yeah, I don't keep up with him, but
he only puts something out every year or two, so it's not that tough. But.
Yeah, no, I'm not that close to the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you follow? What do you enjoy? I mean, I know you read. I know you're
I love
creating.
I love essays.
Yeah. Do you find yourself reading more classic work, or do contemporary essays inspire the same feeling that you have towards contemporary poetry and art? Because they seem to do that for me.
Yeah, I love contemporary essays a lot. Oh yeah. Just reading a wonderful little book by a guy called David Markson, Markson.
He's a friend of Bruce Friedman.
Really?
Yeah, he did Wittgenstein's.
No, I don't think so.
something.
I don't think so.
But anyway, so go on. About Markson.
It's just a very enjoyable read. It's called This Is Not a Novel.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing to have by your bedside.
It's in my library, but I haven't read it yet. But I know exactly where it is on my bookshelf.
You really have it?
Yeah. It was Bruce Friedman worked with him.
David Markson.
Yeah. Bruce used to be an editor at some men's magazines, and he used to edit Markson, Joseph Heller, and Mario Puzo. Wow. And I forget who the fourth one was, but it was just this ridiculous. In his memoir, he goes into these stories, including reading Puzo's manuscript and saying, really love it, but you got to change the title. I mean, The Godfather's the dumbest thing in the world. Oh God! But yeah, Markson's another guy he worked with, a friend. Like he was deeply involved with. But yeah, he'd mentioned This Is Not a Novel, and I forget there was a novel of Markson's with Wittgenstein in the title, but I forget what it is.
And what else did Markson write that was very highly recommended? 1 second. I can't think of it. Just in the back cover, there was a listing of some of his books, and can't think of it.
Oh yeah, I'll mention it in the outro when I do the episode itself. But yeah. So
have you ever been interested in writing?
Yes. I'm a failed writer. When you talk about in Dear James, the Museum of Failed Art, I have let's see, we had the Museum of Failed Titles of Short Stories and Novellas Gil was supposed to write. Yeah. I've written 2 short stories in the past 20 plus years, in relatively recent years, but I say I don't have time, and I use the show as an excuse to, part of what I was thinking during the hour and 40 minutes up here was, what would I be doing on my weekends if I wasn't doing this show? Yeah. And it would be procrastinating and not actually getting around to writing. Yeah. So this way, at least I feel like I'm making something. Like this is my art.
Well, and it is something. I mean, I'm very impressed. I think it's terrific.
Thanks.
I can't get over the photographs. I mean, they are really very, very well done.
We'll see how well you come out in this too. But
well,
I will send you.
I mean,
it's okay. I'll fix it in Photoshop once.
Okay. All right.
But one of these short stories is actually it's about two Jews trying to find somewhere to pray on Yom Kippur. That's and how you can end up in the wrong place under those circumstances. You have any sense of religiosity?
No.
Religion?
None.
Okay. I assume you're Jewish, but that might be completely.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I my assumption being, an illustrator and artist in New York in the 1950s.
Oh yeah.
But no.
Well, but the curious thing is, my wife is named Moshe, and she's not Jewish, and it was very difficult for my mother to call her Moshe. She couldn't do it. It was Marsha until finally she gave up. But
what ethnicity resulted in a Gentile woman named Moshe?
Her parents were artists, and
I named dated a Christian girl or Gentile girl named Ari. Once upon my brother's like, how did you find the one non-Jewish Ari in all of New York City, Gil? I'm like, it happens, Bo.
Well, in any event, her parents were.
What sort of
artists? They were artists, both of them. And so what happened is when her mother announced to the pediatrician that she was pregnant, the pediatrician, who was Jewish, wanted to know whether it was a Moshe or a Gittel. And she didn't like the name Gittel, but she asked about Moshe, and she just called her Moshe, but her real name is Julian. Yeah.
What sort of artists were they? Her parents?
He was amazing. He was head of the WPA Prince Division in Cleveland. He was a wonderful artist. And his wife later became a vitreous enamelist. And he, being very mechanical as well as being very visual, had to help technically. And so he kind of, his career was kind of shortcut by being integrated into the vitreous enamel. So it's kind of very, very sad. I wish I had some of his stuff around. I don't. He's an amazing, amazing artist. Yeah, very tough that he gave it up. He once told me, and there's a certain truth to it, that you can be riding high early in your career, but then there'll be a downside in which your work won't be used as often. And I find that. I mean, I live on these dumb little poetry things. It's about my only income. It's just not good. It's very tough.
And you talk about that a bit in Dear James.
Do I? I don't remember.
There's a degree of telling the young illustrator that, it's great that you're getting a bunch of things now. Or he leaves to go away for 5 weeks or something to Italy, and then it's nobody's calling the young illustrator, and you're like, yep, get used to it. But
no, it's very tough for a lot of my colleagues, but especially for what are they called? Gag cartoonists. No, that's not the right term.
The single panel.
Very tough for them.
Yeah.
I mean, to lose the New Yorker. Oh.
Is there a sense of, I know there's always and it's the same thing in every art form, not simply illustration, making room for the young, etc. But is there a degree to which, and this will once again sound like I'm tooting your horn here, that your style is not exactly, it doesn't date. What you draw doesn't.
Well, I don't know.
It seems sort of timeless. That what you're doing doesn't seem like, oh, look, that's a 1965 era.
Oh, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
And I don't want to imply that you did it for that.
No, it's possible. I really don't know. I mean, because I'm too close to my stuff to look at it objectively. But what the hell?
You still get work.
Yeah, I still get work. Yeah. I mean, not as much as I did.
Yeah. I think, but in some respects, that can also be part of there's less illustration work all around.
I think there's less illustration work all around. Yeah, photography has taken over, and a lot of this 3D stuff, it kills me. I mean, I look at Geico and I think, what the hell are they doing with that ragamuffin doll? I could do so much with it. They didn't even think in terms of how creative an illustrator could be. You're locked into this 3D monstrosity. It's not a monstrosity, but boy, that's an ugly spokes thing for a company. Every now and then I just see things that I know I could do so much better. Yeah, and give it warmth and humor and richness. But we're caught up in this technological fix in which technology has preempted the whatever. I can't find the alternative.
And the warmth. The human line.
Yeah, the human line. Yeah.
I don't want to end on a really depressing note, so we should ask something better than that. What became of the cartoonist or the illustrator who sort of inspired Dear James? Nurit Carlin?
Oh, yeah. Oh, she's fabulous.
Yeah.
She went to Israel and kind of dropped out. She is so good. She's so bright. I love her work, obviously. No, unfortunately, I never heard from her. She used to do work for the New York Times science section. But then leaving the country, she lost the job, and I don't know that she has any connection to the States any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what prompted that? I'm sorry to keep focusing on that book, but it's such a neat one. What prompted Dear James? I know obviously you have a Rilke connection with the letters to a young poet versus letters to a young illustrator.
Well, my son said, hey, why don't you do something that's equivalent for your field? So I decided, what the hell, why not? Mm-hmm. The interesting thing, it was turned down by so many publishers, and thank God my agent stuck to it, because I said, hey, Alexis, why don't you just send it to Southwestern Arkansas College and let them do it, just so the thing. No, I want to see a major. Well, what happened is that Simon & Schuster took it over, but the publicity head had left, so they didn't push it the way it should have been pushed. So it just died, and it was remaindered and probably pulped.
For which you have a wonderful story in Talking Lines.
Yeah, and I had in mind this. Yeah.
Which again brings us back to Clive James, who I mentioned before we started recording, with the book of my enemy has been remaindered, is his great poetic line. What are you? And again, this gets to that weird question of verbal versus visual thinking. Are you more comfortable with illustration, cartooning, prose, animation? Or are they really a gestalt for you, where it's simply?
I'm very comfortable with all of them. I love doing all of them.
And painting.
Yeah, I love doing that.
Call this is now.
I wish I could show you more of the stuff, but you get an idea that. I mean, I have a whole series, News of the Week, WEAK. And it'll end up here. Yeah, maybe I'll show some of the stuff. I don't know.
And I know we shot down the religious aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Politically, stayed active? I mean, this series seems to champion a very progressive
I'm very active politically.
perspective.
Yeah. I mean, we're very involved. Always have been, but more so now.
Which I guess we all have to be. So.
Yeah.
Last question, which is a terrible one. Is imitation the sincerest form of flattery, or does it really piss you off when you see your line in other people's work?
I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It never has. What bothers me is when there are Ed Sorel imitators, and Ed Sorel doesn't give a damn and looks the other way. There is a guy whose name I won't mention, who does wonderful Ed Sorels. I think they're Ed Sorel, but they're not. That bothers me. I don't know that I have so many imitators now. At one point I did, In fact, once I wanted to sue one of the imitators. It looked so much like my stuff. I thought that I had done it. Mm-hmm. Then before I could sue, I found out that the guy was a student of mine. So I wasn't going to sue the guy. I taught him too well or too badly, the latter being the case.
What was teaching like for you? And did you learn anything about art in the process of teaching it to other people?
Yeah, sure. Well, what I liked was the fact that I was able to give them real jobs. Even if a lot of them didn't pay, it meant that they were in the firing line. I remember that when I was in the Army, basic training, you had to call through barbed wire, and there were real machine gun bullets fired at you. You learned to be a soldier that way. You didn't stick your head up to see what the hell was going. Are you ahead or behind anybody else? Or what? So I think there's nothing like getting the confidence that, by God, you could actually do a professional thing. I like that aspect of it. I would give them real problems. And then I loved having their stuff on the board and having the students talk about it. It was very much a seminar sort of experience. My son is a teacher in Paris, and I'm sure he's very good because he's very much a performer. He was a ballet star as a youngster, or really a star. I mean, my wife hates for me to talk this way, but he would just get on the stage, and the stage was his. He had that presence. Very handsome, very commanding, very sure of himself. So I'm sure he's a spectacular teacher, even though he decided to teach philosophy, but it's his philosophy. Yeah.
Keeps him off the streets.
Keeps him off the streets. Because he's on the R.O. Blechman payroll, which I could do without, because I have to support the guy.
Yeah.
France doesn't do it.
Huh.
Well, teaching
there, yeah.
In France doesn't do it.
Another weird question. I knew I'd said it was the last question a few questions ago, but it does occur to me. Anything positive out of your military experience? I know you brought up the worst decision of your life, et cetera. I'm just thinking in terms of reading Pfeiffer's memoirs, where he basically he was like Klinger trying to get out of military service, like in MASH. Did you have anything similar to that, or did you essentially just keep your head down and get through your...
No, I tried to get out of the Army. It was the Korean War, and it was a bloody thing. But I wasn't able to. So it was a good experience because I went to Germany, the right direction, east instead of west. West was death.
Right.
East was a fascinating experience. It was right after the war, 1953, and there was devastation everywhere. But I found it very rich. Yeah. I found it a very rich experience. Was it a positive experience? Well, sure. Anything rich was positive.
You weren't wounded or killed,
No,
But you weren't spending the entire time. I mean, Pfeiffer's stories from the book are like literally starting fires and doing terrible things, trying to get thrown out of the army. So
really?
Oh yeah, read Backing Into Forward sometime when if you
I
get a chance.
did, but I don't remember that.
Yeah, early on he had this crazy stories of trying to get out, and they had some scam that he and a pal were doing where they were painting people's helmets that also ended up going off the rails at some point.
Wow, it's funny that I don't remember that. Yeah.
The tough thing for me is reading. I do this show every week, and there are times that I'm like, I know I read that book 6 weeks ago, but I can't remember very much anymore because but yeah, I'd wondered if you. We won't say positive, but at least you were exposed to things.
No,
it's like when I did Sam Gross, I think he was the same era in Germany and then France. Because he's a little bit younger than you.
By the way.
Yeah, he was, I think he's 83, 84. He might be just a little bit younger than you.
I didn't know that. I thought he was much younger. Yeah, I missed not seeing his stuff in the New Yorker. I don't know how the hell the guy survives. Just so painful.
That was one of my great moments of seeing an artist around your age who he has inventory of art that he keeps everything in notebooks, every single piece of what he's sold and all that. But Yeah, I assume. But the time in Germany, were there artistic aspects of what you were seeing in Germany, or in
No.
the rebuilding phase, or simply just seeing another culture
Seeing another culture.
and not being shot at? Those
Yeah,
are the
not being
important
shot
things.
at. Yeah, yeah. No, it was fascinating.
Besides the an animated life project that you would want to accomplish, is there something you dream about doing?
Well, I'd like an animated 2, an animated Life 3, an animated Life 4. No, well, I'll be doing a book with Fantagraphics.
Yeah. What brought you to Ankrum?
Well, my parents-in-law lived in Stockbridge. Mm-hmm. And so my wife and I wanted to have something that was between Manhattan and Stockbridge. So we found Columbia County. That's how it happened. Mm-hmm. Just quite by chance. And this place was a mess. I mean, it was we created this thing, but it was just falling to pieces. The house was awful. It was forest there. Mm-hmm. And my wife is very visual and a hard worker. And
so you had her pulling stumps out on the...
No, we had a stump puller.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful, beautiful place. In fact, great. I'd love to take a look around once we finish up. Real last question. Do you have former enemies with whom you're now on better terms because you're still around? Are there people that you had we can get past all the shit we hated each other for back in the 60s or 70s because it's 2017?
I didn't have any enemies. I mean,
it's a better life than I've ever had.
Enemies. They were
people who hated you.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Probably jealous. Probably I was busy and they weren't as busy as I was. So I won't give names, but it bothered me because it was so silly. Yeah, colleagues of mine. Just
But time heals.
Yeah.
Ish. So, R.O. Blechman, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual Memories Show.
Oh, sure. Oh, no, my pleasure. I hope I'm all right. I hope.
This is great.
I hope so. Yeah.
And that was R.O. Blechman. You should hit roblechman.com to check out all that work that we talked about, see just the scope and span of his career. And that's ROBLECHMAN. His two most recent books are just amazing. Talking Lines, the graphic stories of R.O. Blechman from Drawn and Quarterly, is this decade-spanning compendium of his work. And Amadeo and Maladeo, a musical duet, was published by Fantagraphics just a few years ago. It's really a joy, that book. I also absolutely love Dear James, Letters to a Young Illustrator, which came out in 2009 from Simon & Schuster. I bought a bunch of copies for friends, and if you listen to this whole conversation, you know that it's a book that I enjoyed a great deal and informed a lot of our conversation. That dual book of comics and prose is due from Fantagraphics in 2018, and I can't wait to see it because his prose writing is a joy also, along with the it's not as squiggly as his drawing line, but it's awful good stuff. Now, I know I said it was a weird episode, but this is also a really special day for me. This guy's work and his life just fill me with awe. Like I mentioned, we spent some time talking after I wrapped, and I got to meet his wife, who was a doll. And we walked around both the studio and their main house, and I was just in heaven. I know no one's life is perfect, but I really enjoyed stepping into theirs for a little while, Anyway, once we wrapped up the main session, I asked R.O., so, who are you reading? If you want to hear his answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. You can do that at patreon.com/VMSpod or at paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for supporters of the show, including that bonus podcast. I just moved it to a quarterly frequency instead of monthly, and there's a huge episode covering all the guests from the first quarter of 2017. It's really amazing. It's good, not just book recommendations, but some nice interplay about the books and the authors that mean a lot to these guests. But it's only for patrons of the podcast. So make sure you contribute through patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. This one was recorded at the Blechman's farm in Ancram, New York. There were a couple of minor tolls, but no real expenses beyond my time and gas money, of course. If you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, and all that stuff, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. A special thanks go out to Kevin Katila, John Wendler, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Wallace Wilde Manozzi, Andrew Mason, Greg Tanner, Garrett Zecker, Craig P. Steffen, and Ron Slate for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Now, our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. David's got a reunion project going with his great 80s band, David and David. They made the album Welcome to the Boomtown, which is one of my all-time faves. You can find out more and support that at facebook.com/DavidandDavidMusic. And that's it for this week's Virtual Memories show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with, I hope, Kyle Cassidy, a wonderful photographer who was a guest on the show way back, like end of 2012. He's got a new book out now called What a Librarian Looks Like, and just came out this week. We are supposed to record down in Philly, but he hasn't gotten back to me yet, so if not him, I've got a couple of other guests already in the can, so there'll definitely be a show next week. We'll just see who it's with. Until then, you can subscribe to the Virtual Memories show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store or at soundcloud.com/VMSpod. You can also find all our episodes, get our RSS feed, and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSpod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. That'll help us build a bigger audience. Until next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.